All right. Hello, everyone. As I admit the people who are in the waiting room into our spring Steinbeck Fellows Reading. Hello. So I'm Keenan Norris, Associate Professor of English and Creative Writing here at San Jose State and the coordinator of our Steinbeck Fellows program. It is my pleasure and my honor to be with you here tonight from the Steinbeck Center itself. This is an online only Zoom event, but even with that being the case, right, I want to give you some taste of what the Steinbeck Center has to offer. So I'll be talking throughout our evening about some of the features of the Steinbeck Center, which is contained within the special collections and archives area on the 5th floor of the Martin Luther King Library on the San Jose State campus and sits adjacent to our Beethoven Center. So with that said, let me go through a few necessary and vitally important particulars to get us started tonight. Okay. First and foremost is our land honor acknowledgement that is provided by the CFA Indigenous Peoples Caucus. We want to acknowledge that we gather as students, faculty, staff, and community of San Jose State University, which is situated on the traditional land of the Mwekma, Tamien, and Ohlone tribes, past and present. The Steinbeck Fellows Program of San Jose State University was endowed through the generosity of Martha Heasley Cox. It offers writers of any age and background a $15,000 fellowship to finish a significant writing project. Named in honor of author John Steinbeck, the program is guided by his lifetime of work in literature, the media, and environmental activism. Fellowships are currently offered in creative writing, not including poetry, and in Steinbeck Studies. Fellows may be appointed in many fields, including literary scholarship, fiction, drama, education, science, and the media. The Steinbeck Center also supports up to 6 exceptional incoming students in San Jose State's MFA Creative Writing and MA English programs with full in-state tuition for their first year of study. All applicants to the 2 programs are considered for these fellowships. There is no additional application required. I'm going to insert into the chat here a link to more information about the Steinbeck Center and the Steinbeck Fellows Program. Give me 1 second to do that. So yeah, you can go there and get more info. All right. Among recent Steinbeck Fellows, we've had many writers who have gone on to great accomplishments in the literary world. Among them is the late Anthony Vias-Nassau, who was a 2021 Steinbeck Fellow, whose short story collection After Parties received the 2021 National Book Critics Circle Award. That same year, former Steinbeck Fellow Meron Hedero was awarded the AKO Kane Prize for a short story Street Sweep. The AKO Kane Prize is awarded in poetry, short fiction, novels, and nonfiction for the entire African continent. So it's a major, major international award. Other former fellows include Vanessa Wah, whose novel Forbidden City reached many bestseller lists in the past year. Aro Kwan, whose novel The Incendiaries did the same a few years ago, as did Gabriela Garcia's Of Women in Salt. All these fellows and many others have gone on to achieve both popular and critical success with their books. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge and to celebrate our incoming 2023-2024 Steinbeck Fellows, who include AJ Bermudez, Francisco Gonzalez, Alexia Nader, Ito Utini, Amanda Riscala, and Shuyu Wang. Let me also place into the chat a link with to more information about our 2023-2024 Steinbeck Fellows. Okay. So, and congratulations to each one of them. So our 2022-2023 fellows include in total Megan Amisor, Annie Vitrin, Amanda May Kim, and our 3 fellows who will be reading this evening. I'll introduce each one as before they read. I'm going to begin with Vivian Ewing. Vivian Ewing is a writer and reporter from Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. She reports for the New York Times, and her fiction has appeared in or is forthcoming from Teeth Magazine, Papersafe Magazine, and elsewhere. Vivian's work has received support from Mary Sky, the Andy Warhol Foundation, and the Community of Writers Conference in the Olympic Valley. She lives in Chicago and is writing a novel about motherhood. Vivian, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Keenan. I really appreciate the introduction, and it's been an honor to be a Steinbeck Fellow this year. I'd like to give a little bit of context for what I'm going to be reading tonight. The novel that I'm writing is about 2 women who have an infant daughter together. Their daughter has a medical condition that prevents her from feeling pain. In the novel, these mothers are trying to figure out a way to deal with this condition. And in doing so, their different parenting styles become very clear. Annie, the narrator, is quite anxious, and her wife, Virginia, is cautious as well, but much less so. However, Annie eventually begins to feel trapped by her own hypervigilance. She spirals and loses touch with who she is outside of a parent. When her anxious monitoring fails to protect her daughter from injury, Annie feels like she's failed as a mother. Eventually, she finds a project outside of the home to focus her obsessive energy on, but this proves to not be the solution she expected either. In the end, Annie's challenge is to find a way out of the trap that she's made for herself. The excerpt that I'm reading tonight comes early in this rough draft of a novel, when the mothers are both still new to the idea of their daughter's condition and what it will require of them. The giant lemon was the first one we saw. The metal contraption was hitched up to a truck, yellow, pockmarked, and gleaming. This lemon came every year. On its side was a rectangle that would open up like a lower jaw to create a window that the fair workers would sell big plastic cups of lemonade out of for some obscene price like $9. That's sort of the fun of the fair, Virginia said from the driver's seat as we drove on past the lemon and toward the grocery store, Hallie in her car seat in the back. It's kind of fun to pay too much for something big and sweet, she said. It's a once-a-year chance to be a little reckless. This is exactly what I was scared of. When I first met Virginia, I told myself that we balanced each other out. I was cautious, often overly so. Virginia went further, drove faster, broke things, and didn't ask for permission or forgiveness. At the fair, she'd let loose. That's what she'd done last year when I was pregnant, drinking with her friends until one of them slipped and fell while getting onto a ride and had to be escorted away, laughing and bleeding. It'll be Hallie's first fair, she went on. She was filling the silence that I was creating. We'd seen the posters. This year's was a cheerleader pyramid of prize-winning pigs, but we hadn't commented on them. I could tell she'd been sensing this would be a problem for me. I know, I said. It wouldn't be too much for any regular 1-year-old, but for her, it's different. Yes, Virginia said, impatient. Yes, she's different. I glanced at Hallie. Her eyes were fixed on the deep blue August sky racing by out the window. We realized that she couldn't feel pain over time. Once at the beach, she picked up broken glass and put it into her mouth. I tried to stop the blood that was pouring down her chin. At the emergency room, they stitched up her lips but couldn't do anything for the gash on her tongue. We took turns staying awake all night, watching over her, to make sure she wouldn't pull out her stitches. Another time, I saw her put out a candle with her bare hand. I rinsed her hand under cool water and watched as a blister formed in the center of her palm. Her condition complicated my desire to create the kind of stable, peaceful childhood that I didn't have. My father had died when I was young, and I'd nearly tumbled down my mom's open-mouthed, wailing grief. I was desperate to give Hallie something else. I wanted her to remember me calm, smiling. Maybe you should just go, I said to Virginia. I wanted to show her I was serious. I'd take the fall, I'd stay home with Hallie, and I'd miss the fair. Come on, Annie, we'll all go. What are you afraid's going to happen to her? I was afraid of Hallie getting too close to the chainsaw carving contest or getting her fingers bitten off by goats. Maybe hot fry oil would splatter onto her face, or maybe she'd get stung by a bee and would stay silent as she swelled up. Virginia was looking at Hallie in the rearview mirror, and because of this, nearly missed the turn into the grocery store parking lot. She hit the brakes, and I gasped and put a hand out onto the car door to brace myself. An overreaction, sure. Virginia rolled her eyes at me, meaning, don't be like that. And I raised my eyebrows at her, meaning, well, don't be like that. On the way home from the grocery store, we passed another fair structure on the road. This one's purpose was less obvious than the lemons. It was lettuce green and folded in on itself like a praying mantis, with a sinister face painted on the sign. It disappeared around a bend in the road. Somehow, I knew we would all go to the fair, and somehow I knew I would regret it. My father had grown up in the same small town, one of 3 freckled boys that were teased for their crooked teeth. He and the other 2 spent hours on the beaches and on motorboats in those days, and their skin crisped under the sun like chicken skin in the oven. I was 6 when my father's skin cancer diagnosis was upgraded to stage 4. Because he lived and got sick in the same town, his hospital room was always full of people. They still made fun of him like they used to, my mom said, trying to get a smile out of him, until he was transferred home. A few hours after he died, they brought me in to see his body. My mom had been crying all day but was composed as she and I entered the room. As I stood there, a man with a beard put out a cigarette and got up to put on a CD that my dad had liked. But when he hit play, the music blasted from the speakers like a shriek. Someone must have left the volume on the stereo all the way up. My hand was in my mom's, so when she fell to her knees, she took me down with her. Someone lunged and unplugged the stereo, but her screaming was just as loud. After getting our hands stamped by a pimply teenager at the fair gates, we waited in line for one of the lemonades and then a pair of hot dogs. I had Hallie buckled into a front carrier. Ooh, look, Virginia pointed her hot dog at a white wooden rowboat that had been hoisted onto a few sawhorses to form a kind of table. A sweaty man tapped a microphone. All right, folks, we're about to get started here, he said. Behind the boat were 2 men and a woman. We found a spot of shade to get out of the growing heat. A man hoisted a barnacle-encrusted metal bushel basket up onto the boat and dumped it out, then spread out the contents. Oysters with fluorescent green algae clinging to their silvery shells. The winner of the annual oyster shucking contest was well respected all year in a reverent hometown hero kind of way. A crowd had gathered around us. Virginia ate the last bite of her hot dog, balled up the wrapper, and shoved it into her pocket. The sweaty man wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and introduced the first contestant, pausing for applause and hooting. My uncle had been an excellent scallop shucker, and I remembered winters in his shucking shack, where I would stick a piece of seaweed into their peach-colored softness to watch them clamp down, and then slowly reopen to reveal their rows of blue dot eyes, peering from the gummy edge inside the shell. The first contestant pulled out his stubby shucking knife, and it glinted in the sun. Maybe a shell fragment would come flying to the crowd, I thought, my mind beginning to tumble down a familiar staircase. Maybe the sharp fragment would shoot into Hallie's eye and we wouldn't even know. She wouldn't cry. This was the worst part. We'd be here for hours, and I wouldn't know that with each blink, she was slicing her cornea. The man introduced the woman, and Virginia cupped her hands around her mouth and hollered. I'd check her eyes after the competition, I told myself. And down on the end, a man who needs no introduction, the sweaty man said, and then didn't introduce him. Everyone cheered anyway. After a countdown, they began to work, while the crowd kept clapping and cheering. A few minutes later, the man on the far end raised both arms to signify he'd finished, and everyone went wild. I craned over Hallie and checked her eyes as best I could. They were clear and bright. I felt relief wash over me. We'd made it through. Past the arts and crafts barn and the fiddle stage, there was a small field at the back of the fairgrounds. Beyond that was the sheep pen. As we approached, a woman was wrangling extension cords. She plugged in an electric razor and was pulling a sheep by the horns into one of the pens. The woman forced the sheep onto its back and began to run the razor down from its neck to its stomach. The poor thing would feel better in this intense heat that was pouring down on us, heavy and thick. The sheep seemed to be looking at me as the woman worked, his iris a horizontal opening. Suddenly, I felt the need to see Hallie's eyes again, just to check. I grabbed Virginia's arm and pulled her close so she could hear me. "Can you take her for a minute?" I asked. "Sure," she said, and tucked her shirt into her pants, readying herself for the baby carrier. I pulled Hallie off of me and felt sweat pour down my stomach and into the waistband of my shorts. I'd put her in a breezy cotton dress and a shade hat, but she felt hot under the arms. Virginia peeled the carrier off me and grimaced as she put it on herself. It was soaking wet where it had been touching me. I handed Hallie to her and helped her with the straps. I buckled the last clip and stood back to look at her. Then, despite the heat, I went cold. I took another step back and blinked. Was this because of the bright sunlight? Was I seeing something? I grabbed Virginia's shoulders and turned her to face me straight on so I could really see Hallie. I had to be mistaken. It was my job to get our daughter up in the morning. It was my job to get her dressed and ready, and it was always, always my job to keep her safe. I'd put sunscreen on myself. I'd even put it on Virginia, but I'd forgotten to put any on Hallie. She was burnt deeply already, a fuchsia that made my stomach turn. I stumbled to the sheep pen railing looking for something to hold on to steady myself. A girl nearby, maybe 13, put her hands out, maybe to catch me, maybe to keep her distance. "Are you okay?" she asked. I'd been so careful to protect my daughter from everything else, but I hadn't protected her from my own mistake. I tried to breathe and inhaled the oily musk of the sheep fur. The electric buzzing felt like it was happening inside my brain. The girl started to back away. I tried to say something but felt myself lurch. "Mom," she yelled and ran away. Somewhere, Virginia was calling my name. I held onto the metal bar and threw up into the grass. Thank you.
Thank you. And all right. So yeah, thank you for that really wonderful reading, Vivian. I want to just, while I have everybody's attention, speak to the Steinbeck Center in general and to our Steinbeck Award, which most recently was won by the or was awarded to Jacqueline Woodson, who is a really incredible children's book author, widely decorated, and was good enough to come and visit us at San Jose State this past year. All right, so let's move on. Oh, I also want to say before we move on to our second reader that we will have a Q&A at the end of this program. So if you have questions that you are interested, that arise for you as you listen to all three of our writers tonight, please place those questions in the Q&A box and we'll move on to those. We'll ask those questions of the writers at the end of the program. Okay. So our second fellow of the night is Renee Shah, who is a writer, editor, and teacher. Renee is the author of the forthcoming novel, Every Happiness, which is coming out from Bloomsbury in 2025. Big congratulations, first of all, on that. Rena's work has appeared in the Masters Review, Midnight Breakfast, Electric Literature, Waxwing Magazine, Joyland, the BBC, and National Geographic, among others. She is a current Michener Fellow at the University of Texas at Austin and has received support from Malay Arts, Tin House, Sustainable Arts Foundation, Cutty Hunk Island Residency, and the Fulbright Foundation. Rena is also a senior fiction editor at the Rumpus. For many years, she was a Katak dancer. I did not prepare for this. Oh, I got it right. Okay. A Katak dancer and public school teacher in New York and in India. You can reach her at renaDshah.com and on Twitter while it lasts at Renee Shah. All right, Rena, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Keenan. Yeah, that was pretty good. It's Kathak, but that was really close. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. And thank you to the Steinbeck Center for this incredible honor. It's been a huge support and it got me to the finish line on this novel. So thank you so much. I'm going to read from Every Happiness. And it's a scene where the two main protagonists, Ruchi and Deepa, who become friends, it's kind of their how they meet at school. So that's the context that I'll give. Instead of ma'am, you must call the teacher's sister. Deepa had told Ruchi on her first day at Parlay English Medium School, run by two nuns of St. Anne's who, it was rumored, had been banished from the convent in Bandra for praying to goddesses. Ruchi was new in 7th standard. She sat alone during mealtime in the shade of the peepal tree, staring into her tiffin. No one invited the dark girl with the oily braid to sit in their circles. And Deepa, who could join any circle she pleased, took Daya and sat with her on the chalky ground. You say service, not toilet, she instructed in English. Or loo if you want to sound posh. Sister Braganza prefers the good girls. She made sure her T's were hard, imitating a private school lilt that would eventually become second nature. Ruchi's khaki uniform looked deeply scrubbed, the sign of a mother trying to make her daughter's clothes look new. The orange dupatta that they all had to wear and an X over their chests was clearly secondhand. Sister Farao doesn't like pets, so you can stop answering all the questions. I don't answer all the questions. You're no good at playing dumb. Deepa learned that Ruchi had only known municipal school, was the middle sister of 3, that the older one didn't finish 10th, and the younger one had no interest. Ruchi had a glow of smartness that could be easily overlooked, but Deepa saw it, how she kept it at the ready. She wove lace trimming into Ruchi's unmanageable hair, whispered about the nuns in her ear, explained that she and her mother had moved from Aden the year before, narrowly avoiding the collapse when the Gujaratis were kicked out. Kicked out for good reason was the phrase Deepa liked to say to invite questions she wouldn't answer. She marveled at the dark marble of Ruchi's skin, but only secretly. Both Sister Braganza and Farao had stubble growing on their chins and identical brows that protruded like cliffs. They barreled like ships across the courtyard and through the halls. They were already ancient when Deepa joined, and by 10th standard, they were old but no older, as if frozen or made of metal. The women lived in a small stone house behind the main building of the school. A giant padlock, sea-scoured with rust that flaked off in chunks, secured the front door of the sisters' home, and the curtains of the 2 dust-caked windows were tightly drawn so that, if a stray girl tried to peer inside, all she would see was herself. On sweltering afternoons, the women retired there, sometimes for hours, emerging in time for dismissal. The nuns inspected the girls in the mornings for lice and pink eye. Enrollment dwindled in 9th and 10th standards, but the school prepared for it by over-enrolling the younger sections, girls in crisp white shirts that Sister Farao compelled to perform rigorous calisthenics as if to ready them for war. Deepa wanted their approval, and when she didn't get it, when she realized that they thought she was insignificant and shallow, when they beat the backs of her hands, first with a wooden ruler and then a plastic one for rearranging her scarf or for braiding her hair to the side, or for hitching her skirt to show her newly waxed legs. Deepa made them into miniature, monstrous figurines and placed the sisters on a shelf in her mind. We too are sisters, Deepa told Ruchi. She visited her friend often, though Ruchi's mother regarded her suspiciously, tutting her painted toenails, her father who never returned from Aden, her mother who let her daughter walk about anywhere. But Ruchi's mother didn't tell Deepa to go home, and instead of feeling grateful, Deepa resented what she assumed was pity. I already have sisters, let's not be like that. They're a bore, Ruchi said. When we get old, we can go to C Club every day for sweet tea and desserts, Deepa said. We can stay all afternoon, eat until we get sick from sugar. They were crouched on the balcony behind the yellow bottles, and through the gaps, Deepa could only see green, sun-soaked leaves, the city a mirage within which they were cocooned, the cool concrete imprinted on their backs. We can grow fat, Deepa said, and balloon to the sky, big and swollen. She danced her arms in the air, and as she did, a crisp cloud of odor escaped and stung her own nostrils, filled her throat, a scent of rotten pulp. She saw Ruchi swallow, maybe in disgust, but it made Deepa hungry. You know, we should get rid of this. Deepa dragged her finger across the top of Ruchi's lip. Are? Ruchi swatted her hand away and covered the shadow of hairs. Deepa had already banished her own mustache, which was anyway lighter, more like fuzz than teeth. I can do it for you. My mother showed me how. Your mother? Why not? Was there blood? Did you pluck them? What are you, stupid? Do you not know threading? It takes only 2 minutes. They tiptoed into the bedroom. When Deepa came over, Ruchi hid her away so no one could drag them down to the compound and make them play coco or oil someone's feet. The flat was cramped and weary from so many people, so many women. Ruchi's cousins and sisters who all slept in one room, bedding rolled up on the floor. Ruchi's dadi, who it seemed only Ruchi truly loved and who bellowed at mealtime. Deepa wouldn't have minded playing coco or oiling someone's feet. She wouldn't have minded the fullness of the flat, but she would never admit to her loneliness. They found white thread in the vanity under the green 3-way mirror. It was the one indulgence in the austere room. Deepa patted the tufted seat and pulled at the thread. It's thick, but it will do. Now sit down and look up. Are you sure you know how? Ada, you are a scaredy. She wound the thread, held one end taut with her teeth, and swept it across Ruchi's forearm. Ouch! But it was already over. Red, raw skin littered with thick commas of hair. Deepa tilted Ruchi's forehead back with her thumb, so her head rested on the mirror behind her. She searched for an opening and drew closer. Close your eyes, but close them, it's better. She felt Ruchi's shoulder against her chest, the brisk exhale of pain as Deepa motored the thread efficiently across the lip, once, twice, thrice. She caught the two of them in the mirror, reflected again and again. Ruchi's skin was a violent red, a splotched newborn color, a hairless mustache. There was no cream to calm it. Oh, it's lovely, Deepa said, turning Ruchi around so they could peer at her handiwork. Their faces reflected to infinity. The heat wouldn't ease, though it should have after the new year, the sun in constant rapture. Deepa watched Ruchi sitting in the second row, tidying her books inside her desk, lining up the ruler and pencils. The day's paper was yet another form on Shivaji, only slightly more complex than what was taught in 7th standard and in 4th before that. Who was Shivaji? When did he rule? When was he born? What was the Battle of Raigat? How did he kill Afzal Khan? When did Aurangzeb place him on house arrest? What year did he become ruler of Maharashtra? Deepa answered with no interest, but she saw Ruchi hunched over her blue notebook, the delicate movement of her pencil indicating small, fastidious handwriting. So much useless work. On the way out, Sister Braganza waved the paper like a flag and called to them from down the hall. Deepa assumed that finally she'd made a positive impression, that her form received top marks for its precision and brevity. Sister Farao and I would like a word, the woman said, but when Deepa stepped forward, the sister looked through her. Ruchi froze. Chal, Deepa said, they're calling you. But what for? It can't be anything good, Deepa whispered. Look at how her nose is sweating. Go, I'll wait right here. But the nun didn't lead Ruchi to the office. Instead, she walked briskly across the courtyard to the little wooden house, Ruchi following with her hands hugging her elbows. Deepa watched them until they turned the corner and out of sight, then waited among the vines of the overgrown peepal tree, breathing the humid breeze from faraway mountains. And it seemed that hours passed, though it wasn't possible because the sun didn't move, and she worried that her friend was being berated or beaten for some random infraction, and Deepa prepared to set aside her jealousy to blow on the raw parts of Ruchi's hand. Are so long you took. What did the two witches do? Deepa asked when Ruchi appeared. She looked unharmed. They said somewhere in the branches, bulbuls called out angrily, wings flapping against each other, fighting or copulating or both. They said I have top marks, that I should do medicine, Ruchi said in a small voice. But Ami will never allow it. Her face was lit with pride, her paper clutched in a fist. Top marks? Ruchi tried to speed ahead as she smiled, tried to focus on the steamed milk that was waiting for her at home, the scald down her throat. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Rena. And I'm going to place into the chat as well those, whatever you call them, those, yeah, handles, right? I think that's the social media word for them. And our other two writers as well, Vivian and Bobuq, if you'd like to place any, social media handles, etc., into the chat, please do. So before we move on to our third and final fellow reading, I do want to spend a second just talking about all that you can see at the Steinbeck Center. There's cool like manuscripts, archival stuff and all that, but there's also all these great posters. Every time I come here, I'm just reminded of all the tremendous like posters of different Steinbeck books that were made into movies, and it becomes sort of like a journey through or an introduction to early Hollywood. It's pretty cool. So all right, I just want to remind folks that if you would like to ask the writers a question, you can just insert that question into the Q&A and we will come to it. All right, our third and final reader is Bobuq Sayed, who is a queer Afghan Australian writer with an MFA in creative writing from the University of Miami, where they were a James A. Michener Fellow. They have received fellowships from the Lambda Literary Retreat, Tin House, Kundiman, and Vona Voices. And their writing has appeared or is forthcoming in Guernica, The Drift, New Australian Fiction 2022, Gulf Coast, Collisions, Fictions of the Future, Minjin, and The Rumpus. They are the co-editor of an anthology called Nothing to Hide, Voices from Trans and Gender Diverse Australia, in addition to completing a novel about queer and trans exiles living in Istanbul, Turkey. Bobuq, it's my pleasure. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Keenan, and Janice as well, for all of the behind the scenes work that you'll do to keep this center and fellowship alive for us. Okay, I'm just going to read from the beginning of my novel called No God But Us. Part 1. The drag queen with my money was missing in action. I'd stalked all of backstage, the filthy dressing rooms, the manager's office, the bathroom stalls in graffitied disrepair, and even the alleyway behind the dumpsters, although Creamy Ibrahimi had a falsetto to protect, and she wouldn't be caught dead smoking a cigarette before her second performance of the night. Have you seen Creamy anywhere? The 7-foot-tall bouncer leaning against the hallway's door jamb didn't budge. I asked him again. He stroked his bulge through his pocket and palmed the barely consenting hip of a pole dancer speaking in Tagalog to her mom back home. Prop boxes and suitcases were stacked in the narrow hallway and overflowed with coin headdresses and sequins. In the months since my anticlimactic debut, I'd learned some ugly lessons. Drag queens tended to overpack in case of emergency, seedy stalkers or gunshots, or a last-minute flash of inspiration. I winced and shifted the weight on my feet as though I were bursting to pee. I considered releasing a trickle so the rank smell might get the bouncer or the dancer to pay attention to me, except they'd pity me if I peed. No entertainer wants pity to be the reason people look. In the end, the pole dancer tossed her eyes towards the out-of-use disabled stall in the back. In a place like this, you have to dazzle the girls before they'll take you seriously or acknowledge you exist at all. Subtle humor and grace and DIY charm don't mean shit here. It's dazzle or bust, and dazzling anyone on a budget was no easy feat. That's why I needed to get paid. Between me and the door, marked with the stamp of a wheelchair, was a wire clothes rack come loose off its hinges. I pushed it to the side, and inside, indifferent to me calling her name for the last 20 minutes, was Creamy, getting her dick sucked. She said, "Fuck, I thought I locked that thing." And I told her she didn't lock shit. She knew she didn't. The door was barely even closed. She did look good though. Her cheetah print leotard unclipped from beneath and rock hard, the way a dick only ever gets when it's been freshly untucked after hours of cramped concealment. Creamy, babe, I need to get going. I've already missed 2 trains home. Khandul's having a big party for all the Afghans. You know how she gets when she hosts. She's called me 3 times today because she doesn't want me to be late. The aunties are crossing state lines to come judge us. Do you have my cash from tonight on you or not? The cocksucker slid Creamy's dick out of his mouth. The floor was stained with some foul, gender-ambiguous grime, and small patches of wetness showed on his knees. Party? Not that kind of party, sweetheart. Keep going. Creamy ruffled the cocksucker's hair tenderly. I recognized the guy on his knees as the stagehand. Who the fuck was running the lights if this guy was in here sucking dick? Girl, you were all over the place tonight. What the hell was that? You totally botched the choreography. I could barely watch it. It stung to hear Creamy put to words what I already knew. She was right, though. I'd missed my cue and completely failed to land the ending. It's this thing I have to go to tonight at my mom's. And you didn't warn me how strong your weed pen was. I got stuck in my head. Creamy erupted into a laugh, and it sort of segued into a moan at one point as she redirected her gaze. I stood there another minute, waiting for her to notice me. She seemed exasperated when she did. Look, babe, the venue shorted us again, but here's part of what I owe you. I took the 2 20s Creamy held out, since she was sort of pinned to the wall by the suction. The pay was less than the cost of my outfit, but if I kept mix and matching elements and shoplifting from church-run thrift stores, soon I'd be able to afford something truly exquisite. You don't think you can move me to a later slot? There's barely anyone in the audience at that hour. It feels like I'm still in rehearsal mode. The stone butch on the bar is the only one who tips me, and she does it from the register. Creamy stepped forward and began to face fuck the bottom. You could see the imprint of her dick travel down the ribs of the guy's esophagus. I wasn't sure Creamy had even heard me, but if I didn't leave the cubicle soon, I'd start to get hard, and I couldn't afford to make it home any later than I already was. I went to make my exit when Creamy addressed me mid-groan. Babe, you're not ready for the main show at all. You're janky as hell. For real, you suck. And anyway, you're so perfect at the start, Habibi. You and that sultry, Celine routine inaugurate the whole night. You cleanse the space, babe. It's evil eye shit, man. It opens the space up for the rest of us. That was sweet of her to say, although I'd heard some version of it before. The sentiment echoed what every soccer coach and sports captain had ever told me. The bench is one of the most important places in the game, they'd say. Someone needs to fetch the sliced oranges and hand them out during halftime. It's a crucial job. Hydration is the most important goal of all. Except I'd never wanted to participate in those boorish displays of masculinity. The sick way men chased after balls like salivating terriers. Even though I was still fresh to drag, it activated something in me that felt uniquely my own. A place I could go to be a girl for a minute and howl in feminine rage at the moon. My enormous legs didn't always cooperate with the choreography, but it was undeniable that they looked extremely cosmopolitan in a miniskirt. Creamy worked in marketing as a day job. He was smart to predict there'd be a dedicated audience for a gay Middle Eastern drag night in a city of immigrants, even though less than half the performers fell under the umbrella of the Middle East anyway. It's about an Oriental aesthetic, he said, when I brought it up a few months ago, back when I was first learning to block my eyebrows and set a wig. Barely any white people come to our events. It's a sea of brownies, babe, loving what we love. We're fucking with the exoticism, see? It's all by us, for us. Both your parents are Pakistani, babe. You're not even Arab. Creamy put his lip pencil on the table and stared directly at me in the dressing room mirror. She took her duty as my self-elected drag mom very seriously. Leave this I am or I am not bullshit alone. You want to be a performer? We'll get used to doing things you aren't. I was onto my 4th round of applying industrial glue to my eyebrows to get them to disappear under makeup, and mine weren't even the thickest pair in the room. It's not Eurovision, babe, chill. All I'm saying is that you're sort of playing into the stereotype with the belly dancing and the Bollywood. You're giving them exactly what they already expect from us. An Egyptian girl applying her foundation a station over told me to shut the fuck up. All my big talk was making her smudge the sharp outline of the Nefertiti look she prided herself on. No one had the heart to tell her the look was derivative, because one night her father had showed up asking for her and loudly reciting the Shahada until the bouncer escorted him out. From behind the curtain, I peeked on stage one final time before I left the venue. The crowd was getting livid for a Malaysian T-Girl's signature Shakira medley. I'd seen it so many times, I knew the exact point in She-Wolf where she revealed her oozing fangs. They went crazy for her, and as usual, the high-pitched Sarkuruta ululations grew louder than the backing track. That was me in the audience on the tail end of winter, having heard about Creamy's event from a Lebanese guy I was fucking with. It didn't strike me as strange until later that he was strictly down low with his sexuality, but consistently knew the lyrics of each number by heart. I took the back exit by the alley, which the other girls preferred because it meant they could avoid getting cited and stalled by the repressed gender shit of people in the audience. That wasn't a problem for me. No one was coming out to see me perform, and my Celine routine certainly wasn't a model of sexual emancipation. If anything, the takeaway was, damn, this girl's got some shit to work through. I used the alley so I could have a cigarette before the train. Creamy? A girl's voice broke the rhythm of my heels and suitcase wheels on the gritty cement. She was walking up towards me from the street, glitter and blue plastic stars flaking off her cheeks where she'd adhered them with spit or cheap eyelash glue from the Dollar Tree. It was dark in the alley, but not that dark. I made sure I wasn't caught under the harsh glow of the streetlight. Drag is street magic. You don't want someone close enough to start poking holes in the logic. The Creamy Ibrahimi? Oh my God, I follow you online. I loved your performance. As a fellow Arab, it's so important to see you up there. You totally stole the show. At first, I let the delusion wash over me. It felt good, an impromptu stage. All of the accolades for my performance and none of the merit to warrant it. I nodded along, trying to pass until she stepped into my way. She was determined to involve me in the moment she was having. I'm bisexual and I have a husband, and I just feel like no one gets it. I'm actually super gay, you feel me? It's just tough because my parents don't take me seriously as a queer body, even though they're doctors and they should know better by now. They're babysitting our kids tonight, actually. I'm always trying to explain how it's so mentally restorative to come to events like this and just be at one with my community. It's not just a party for people like us, you know? It's home. She kept getting closer and closer, even as I resumed my march to the train. Her face was flat like an envelope, light-skinned but not white, a harder assailant for me to condemn. An emergency vehicle a few streets over released a shrill siren into the air. I was starting to tense up. I really needed that performance tonight. My hubby loved it too. I think he's secretly bisexual as well, even though he won't admit it. I'm working towards getting a finger in his butt. Like me, it was clear she wasn't from the city. Her husband had probably driven their Lexus SUV into the district from Maryland or Virginia, where the immigrants made a living servicing the government crowds, the military contractors, and the lobbyists. It's likely she'd gone to the same public schools that I'd gone to, had fled across the Potomac River for the same reasons I had, except she'd taken the path of least resistance. She'd had the other option at her disposal, one without duplicity and dishonesty. Thinking about it made my ears hot. If Allah's up there, he was an asshole for denying my childhood prayers, prostrated at the edge of my bed, beating my head on the frame. I wished to be anything but gay, but lo and behold, gay is here and now what I got. Wait, it was happening. Right in front of me, the bi girl was starting to cry. An exorcism. She was experiencing emotional catharsis with me. No, with Creamy. She told me how her colleagues at the clinic thought she was just trying to be cool, about the erasure and the illegibility. On and on the soliloquy went. I swear I didn't utter a word. Once the urge in me appeared, it refused to be silenced. I couldn't help it. I felt a lug of loose fluid travel up my throat, a cocktail of saliva and tequila sunrises and that nasty 7-Eleven tuna salad sandwich I'd eaten earlier. I turned towards the girl, wrapped my lips around the glob, and spat it directly onto her. Even I was surprised, though I guess she wasn't expecting it either. She stared open-mouthed at the little wad of frothy spit sliding down the thighs of her vinyl pants and stopped speaking at last, only to shriek monstrously a moment later. I waited until I was a healthy distance away from her at the corner of the seedy 24/7 video store before I turned. Creamy's in the dressing room, babe. I'm someone else. She was already rummaging in her handbag for her phone. It was only a matter of time before her 100% straight husband heard about her run-in with the aggressive drag queen. You should be careful, he'd say. There could be anyone underneath all that makeup. The venue might get a sternly worded email by Monday morning. The married pair would threaten to take their business elsewhere or leave a Yelp review. Thankfully, no one had any idea who I was. Thanks.
Bobuq, thank you. That was incredible, and really speaks to how like a perspective that seems superficially seems to be located toward the margins is really at the center and sees everything. And really all three of these readings were tremendously touching and incredibly powerful in their own very distinct ways, from the enormous complexities of motherhood to the ways in which the complexities of childhood and disability and the ethical dilemmas that arise there. I was thinking about, as y'all read, Zadie Smith's words in her essay, Fail, Fail Again, Fail Better, that a great piece of fiction can demand that you acknowledge the reality of its wildest proposition, no matter how alien it may be to you. It can also force you to concede the radical otherness lurking within things that appear most familiar. All right, so there's a lot, I have questions that I could ask. Hopefully the audience has questions that they want to ask. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but so I'm going to ask the first question, and then if there are people in the audience who have questions, first of all, I do want to thank the audience for being here on Zoom. Whether or not you have a question, thank you for being here and supporting our wonderful writers. But yeah, if you do have a question, please ask it. Okay, so my question is related to another, something else that a famous writer said about writing. So In Letters to a Young Poet, Rainer Maria Rilke said, and if I can find it here, I will read it. This above all, ask yourself in the stillest hour of your night, must I write? My question, you guys, is in your stillest hour, what bids you write? Why, what inspires you most to write?
Well, I feel like for myself, like I don't feel like someone who was like born to be a writer. This is the only medium I was ever going to choose. I feel like I've gotten what I get out of writing from other, creative or artistic pursuits, but I do feel like I seek out the feeling that writing gives me in my life, So I think that like getting into a place where I feel like my self is out of the way is important to me, and I feel like I've found that in writing. But yeah, I feel like that feeling is more important to me than the actual medium that gets me there. So I think that if I didn't have that, I would definitely look for it somewhere else. But yeah, this is where I'm getting it.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. And either Rena or Bobuq? Yeah, Rena.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was a dancer before I was a writer. I don't know if there was a before. I think writing was very private for a long time. And I think as much as, I find the process of writing, sometimes it's joyful, like, the process of drafting, but it's often excruciating at times, but yet I think it's that feeling of like being disoriented that's both excruciating, but also one that I like feels essential, like that feeling of not knowing, like, or discovering who this character is or what this situation is, or so I feel like that way, that kind of, I'm attracted to that kind of work as well, where it's there's a sense of surprise in the writing. And I think that for me, the process of finding surprise is what I feel like it's almost a compulsion, like I can't not do it. And so I don't know if that's an inspiration or just more like, why do I, keep doing it? Because it's hard, right? Writing is hard, but I don't see that, I guess, like that process of being, both with yourself and not with yourself at all, to be both of those things at the same time, kind of what Vivian was talking about. And I think when I was a dancer, it was a little different. It was a different feeling, which I enjoyed, but in its own way. But I think with writing, because I'm often alone when I'm doing it. And so it's this both private experience, but also very much about getting outside of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Bobuq, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, question of inspiration. I guess the first thing that just comes to mind is like something I love about fiction and the project as large as a novel is that it kind of like channels my like tendencies for delusion and like fabrication and like verboseness into this like other external things, so that it doesn't like, I'm not like leading with delusion or fabrication in my like real life. And so I think in that sense, that's like what inspires me. Like if I'm like creating too much conflict in my outside world, I know that actually it's time for me to like direct that like conflict, that engine back into the non-manuscript.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. All right, so we have a couple questions. One thing, just as I said, I'm in the Steinbeck Center, and we're about to get a intercom message here. But let me ask you here, how has receiving the Steinbeck Fellowship helped you with your work?
I can
Oh,
start.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, please, I'll go after you.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think it gave me the resources I needed to have time to just dedicate to this chunk of the novel that I was struggling with and still struggling with even now, after it's like, I've got an editor, but it's still a struggle, but got me to the finish line. I think that support was huge. And I think just like being, all of the writers that were part of this cohort, just kind of, reading your work and learning about your work and kind of knowing that we're all doing this, being part of that community, that I found just really supportive, because again, it is a very solo venture, but I think it gave me at this point where I was struggling to get the novel to where I wanted it to be. I think it gave me that support I needed.
Absolutely. Anybody else who'd like to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, from a, like maybe a more practical standpoint, like I think that the financial support is so helpful when like time is money, like it's just so helpful to be able to take some time that I might spend on other, endeavors, other work, and dedicate that time to this project. For me, like, that created a type of focused time that really allowed me to write an entire, this entire draft of this novel. And so I feel like, figuring out like a life that involves writing is, it really is reliant on the type of, generous support that the fellowship provides.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I mean, I think this fellowship and others, really the intention at the end is to support writers, right? We are writers and we want to support each other in our endeavors. And Bobuq, if you'd like to chime in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I totally concur with all those comments. There's really nothing quite like just sort of like no strings support for your project. And yeah, I just feel like there's like a real tendency, especially coming out of like creative writing programs, especially for projects like novels, where it's like the large majority just like of thesis projects and like grand ideas, and even like maybe, like half-formed drafts end up just collecting dust in a drawer somewhere, or like, just creating some kind of like, psychological stress on some hard drive, because there are people have to prioritize other things, and like obviously that matters. It's like it's very singular and like sort of extraordinary to be able to actually spend this much time on that project. And for me, at least, it really made the difference between like whether or not this project would happen or not.
Yeah, thank you. And we have one more question. We're also going to get one more visit from the intercom here. You're getting the real Steinbeck Center experience that we would have if we were meeting in person. It's like it's just waiting. Okay, bear with me for a second. It's all good. But not closed to us.
Until 12 a.m. All others must exit the building now. Once again, the library is now closed to the public. Extended study hours are now in effect.
All right. So current one of your fellow Steinbeck Fellows, Megan and Mysore, has a question. Megan writes, I'm interested in who you might see as your readers/audience, and if this has changed at all for you from when you first started writing.
I think that something that I've tried to do is to, I don't know if this is like the right way or if I do this differently in the future, but I've tried to think about like entertaining myself, like writing for myself. Sort of, I would say, like intentionally trying to like forget about outside readers, because I imagine that will be, just a large part of my like revision process. And if things move forward with this novel, just like part of the process going forward from the first draft on. So I think for me, I've tried to just keep myself, like if I feel like invested in the story, then that's sort of been my checkpoint for the first draft, to sort of keep it in my head and in my world, until I understand really what the story is, and then move forward from there.
Yeah, anybody else? Audience is always a difficult question, so.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the one thing I feel I'm maybe consciously doing is not, I'm assuming my audience is going to understand, right? And so that they will figure things out to a certain degree, like, if there's words, I'm playing with language at times in terms of using Gujarati words, or even certain references that I just don't feel the need to explain them. And I don't know if I feel like I've embraced that more and more I think part of Megane, your question was like, has it changed? And I guess like the deeper I've gotten into this novel, the more strongly I feel about that. And kind of separating that from, well, there are places where maybe something is truly confusing, like there's a logical leap or, something like that, like separating that from, say, the cultural context or the context of the community, wanting to kind of embrace a certain voice and, references that the characters understand. So I think the readers will understand because they'll make the effort to understand. So I guess that's like one sort of audience that I feel like I'm writing for, that kind of audience.
And Bobuq, if you'd like the last word here.
Yeah. I feel like I was thinking about this question actually today because when I started writing this novel, like 3 or 4 years ago, about this like Afghan drag queen, like drag queens in America actually like had a kind of very different social and political role. Like it's kind of been kind of wild to like have this project be in the back burner for like obviously many years, but to also like have this parallel universe of like what's happening in the country. And I live in Florida, where like drag in public is actually like illegal and like a felony offense, like something crazy like that. So I guess it's like, the audience is interesting because I wonder if I were like right now to begin writing a project about drag queen, knowing what I do about the political context and like the sort of social and political responsibility that a drag queen now has as like some kind of you know, like very controversial figure, despite their like previously like widespread benevolence, you know, just like this like creature of all of good and entertainment, which I still believe, of course. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that like this drag queen in my work is like not like a hero drag queen, right? They're not like morally good, or maybe like better described as like interested in goodness and virtuousness. But that obviously has a different inflection in the current political climate. But like that's the character, you know, like they do what they do. They have their own mind at this point. And so yeah, I feel like to like circle all the way back to like this question of audience, it's interesting because I think I've had to like really dig my heels in for like, who is this book and who's this character for? Because actually, if this book about a drag queen, an Afghan drag queen, were like meant for to like rehabilitate the public image of drag queens in like 2023, then actually like I would be writing a different book and be writing a different character. And so I've had to like really commit to the original vision of like who this book was for, which were, you know, like sort of like very, I'd say like a very like niche community, right? It's like a community within a community within a community. And to like really have to modify the language I'm using, the slang I'm using, and also just like the social and moral codes of the characters and the like, you know, the conflicts because of how they behave and then what their like, you know, communities look like.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to thank all of you for your really insightful and you know, deep answers to those questions. Yeah, you know, first of all, I just have to say, you know, Nina Simone wrote, Mississippi goddamn, we might need a Florida goddamn. Excuse my language, but wow. And yeah, that's the first thing I want to say. But also that you know, I've, you know, Bobuq, to points you were making, yeah, I also, you know, in 2021 when I was finishing my novel, I felt, you know, similar kinds of tensions around the social upheaval in the country and the ways that society's perceptions of Black people both were and were not changing. It's an incredibly fraught time. It's an incredibly vibrant time, you know, that we're all you know, getting to work in, and full of all kinds of complexities and questions. I want to thank all three of our readers, our Steinbeck Fellows, Bobuq Sayed, Renee Shah, and Vivian Ewing, as well as our other current Steinbeck Fellows, Megan Mysore, Annie Vitrin, and Amanda May Kim. We, of course, also, once again, are looking forward to and welcoming our 2023-2024 Steinbeck Fellows. And I want to close by giving thanks as well to Steinbeck Center Director Daniel Rivers, and most especially to the administrator and really the brains behind this entire operation for the last couple of years, who's helped me so much in coming into the this program coordinator position. I would have been a complete failure in this, in this position if not for the very special, very important work of Janice Zelaya. Thank you so much, Janice. I really, really appreciate your work. All right. So with that, I just want to bid everybody adieu. Have a good night. Peace.